The greatest king on the continent of Ares, also known as the Mad King Mars, is a living legend in history. Attended only by normal companions, he remains undefeated until the day of his death. Before his final breath, he supposedly admits that he does not want to eat something so disgustingly nasty, or so the legends say. An attendant brings Mars his meal, but he waves it off, saying he has no appetite right now. This pretty boy is the prince of a small kingdom tucked away in the corner of the continent of Ares. You might assume that as a prince he has access to endless trays of luxurious, mouth-watering food, but reality hits different. The poor guy is forced to survive on disgusting monster meat just to stay alive. He even escapes the castle to hunt monsters in the forest and eat them. It's not like the kingdom is broke or that there isn't enough food in the castle for the prince of the realm. In truth, the kitchens overflow with delicacies, but most of that luxurious food is laced with poison. The kingdom is crawling with corruption, and their prime minister, Gamarus, is a straight-up tyrant. For reasons known only to him, he sees the prince as a thorn in his side and is determined to assassinate him at all costs. So monster meat, as foul as it is, becomes Mars's daily grind. The meat is no better even when cooked, but Mars forces himself to eat it to survive. Just as he is about to take a single bite, a mysterious woman suddenly appears behind him, wanting to recruit him as her pupil. Mars instantly steps back, more wary than ever because he hadn't even noticed her presence. The woman coolly assesses that while he has much to learn, he definitely holds potential. She even goes as far as to declare him worthy of inheriting her blade. Mars asks her how she decides such things, and the truth makes him nearly choke. The criteria to become her student is eating monster meat. Mars is as speechless as the rest of us would be. The woman explains that by eating monster meat, a human can slowly absorb the strength of monsters. But the process is slower than a turtle race, the taste is terrible, and the meat is straight up poisonous, so no sane human would ever choose it. Mars questions his life choices once again, and admits that he did throw up the first few times he tried it, but still, it was less poisonous than the meal that had unalived the royal poison tester. The woman demands further explanation, and Mars spills everything despite it being an internal kingdom matter. He reveals that he is a prince, that his mother has passed away, and that his father does not protect him despite being king. Because of the brutal competition for the throne, Mars is a prime assassination target, and every single dish served to him is laced with poison. The woman quickly understands the situation. Mars eats monster meat not out of choice, but because he is running away from poisoned meals in the castle. However, she bluntly tells him that the meat he has been eating is poisonous as well. Mars thinks it is pretty rude of her to ignore him like that and show no sympathy for his sorrowful story. But contrary to his assumptions, the woman actually finds him impressive and tosses something toward him to help with the poison. Mars catches the ominous-looking ring and thanks her, though deep down he remains skeptical about receiving anything from someone he just met. He demands to know her reason for giving it. Finally, she introduces herself as Cassandra. Mars's dumbfounded face immediately goes wide-eyed. Cassandra is none other than the Red Demon Sword Saint. The Red Demon, also known as the Beast, is a battle-crazed warrior, a saint so famous that she has defeated dragons and evil gods alike. Mars instantly believes that a ring from her must be a powerful magical item, and not only that, if Cassandra takes him as her pupil, assassins can just forget about getting anywhere near him. But his daydream shatters immediately. Cassandra tells him that the ring she has given him is actually a cursed item that afflicts its user with poison. This, she explains, is her very first test for him as her disciple. She wants him to conquer the poison from the ring or die trying. Mars collapses at once, feeling as though he is going to die on the spot. Cassandra, however, remains calm and cold, stating that it is pathetic to rely on external items against something as basic as poison. According to her, true resistance is learned only by facing poison head-on and surviving it. She makes it clear she will not remove the ring unless Mars either conquers it or dies. Normal humans would die in no time, but because Mars has consumed monster meat for so long, he just might be able to resist it. Of course, Mars's first impression of his new master is that she is nothing but bad news. She literally slaps him with poison when all he wants is to avoid it. The royal doctors rush in but cannot heal Mars. Even magic fails. He ends up half dead for 3 whole days and nights. Every doctor quickly gives up trying to cure him, and rumors spread through the castle that he has finally succumbed to poison. But somehow, his main character Yahello pulls through and he miraculously survives. Though many congratulate him on recovering from poison, no one finds it even slightly strange that their prince keeps getting poisoned. Even his father, the king, tells him bluntly that it is his own responsibility to protect himself. A heartless thing to say to someone who has barely survived, but Mars lets it go since technically, this time, It is his own fault for wearing the ring. Even after recovering, Mars worries his food will continue to be poisoned. But surprise, the poison now gives his taste buds a weird little kick, and he ends up eating everything with unexpected gusto. Mars immediately reports back to his master that he has conquered the poison, and thanks her deeply, happy that he no longer has to worry about deadly assassins slipping poison into his meals. But Cassandra, the torture queen, isn't done yet. She gives him bracelets imbued with gravity magic that double his body weight the moment he puts them on. Mars begins to wonder if this woman is just trying to unalive him outright. She asks if he is still eating monster meat, but Mars admits that he hasn't touched it for a week since poison no longer scares him. Cassandra shakes her head and says that's not good enough. She personally hunts down a monster, cuts its meat into small pieces, and tosses one right into Mars's face. It turns out to be basilisk meat, rare and terrifying. She orders him to eat it raw, saying that cooking it would weaken its effect. Mars takes a hesitant bite and instantly feels poison coursing through his body, but Cassandra orders him to swallow. He obeys, collapsing to his knees in agony, but Cassandra only comments that stronger monsters naturally have stronger poison. Basilisk venom alone is enough to sweep 500 adults, but Mars somehow manages to choke it down. Thinking that this torture must be over for the day, he is horrified when Cassandra demands that he finish the entire monster. Mars protests furiously, but his master cuts him off with a smirk. If he is really strong enough to stop eating monster meat, then he should prove it by attacking her with a sword. Mars is offended. She doesn't even draw her weapon. Determined to prove himself, he strikes her with all his power. The result is exactly as anyone would expect. Cassandra defeats him easily and declares that he is clearly weak, ordering him to eat more monster meat. As she force feeds him, Mars curses her name, finally understanding why people call her the Red Demon. From then on, his brutal training begins. Cassandra makes him eat monster meat and practice swordsmanship without pause. They only meet once a week, but she is sharp enough to notice every detail. If he tries to cheat and skip eating, she force feeds him. If he doesn't take sword training seriously, she beats him into the ground. Eventually, Mars's training evolves into an endless cycle of fighting and eating monsters. Cassandra herself always chooses monsters carefully, picking those that he can just barely defeat. Yet, among all the monsters, Cassandra remains the strongest opponent by far. Her special skill is to hold back just enough not to unalive him, which means Mars is constantly beaten within an inch of his life. After 3 years of this hellish training, Mars starts to get the hang of it. He learns to detect presences, dodge attacks, and sharpen his instincts, mostly because he is terrified of being hit by Cassandra. All in all, those 3 years are pure torture. Compared to facing Cassandra or the powerful monsters she throws at him, fighting assassins back in the castle feels like child's play. Then one day, Mars hunts a dragon entirely on his own. It isn't the strongest kind of dragon, but it is still a dragon, no joke. Cassandra praises him for his strength, but Mars insists he has no choice, since he would rather die fighting than starve. Together, they roast the meat as a celebratory feast. Cassandra compliments him for getting used to monster meat, but Mars admits he only got used to it because he has eaten it every single day. Deep inside, he still thinks assassins are easier to deal with than his master, but Cassandra smiles and tells him that she has nothing left to teach. She warns him to keep up with his training because if she ever finds out he is slacking the next time they meet, she will take his life without hesitation. And with that, Cassandra departs. Mars never asks where she goes, but it seems she wanders the world hunting powerful enemies. Staying 3 years in one kingdom is already unusual for her. Still, Mars knows she absolutely will come running back to beat him down if he skips his training. Thanks to those years of torment, Mars does grow stronger, but he also knows he still isn't strong enough. The fragile thread he grasps to escape assassins drags him straight into the pits of hell. He has no idea how deeply his encounter will reshape his destiny. Yet, in order to survive the assassins, Gamarus keeps sending to withstand terrifying monsters, and, above all, to avoid death at the hands of his own master. Mars has no choice but to keep chewing down nasty monster meat. So yeah, this is the story of an MC whose entire existence revolves around curse training, survival instincts, and eating the nastiest meat imaginable. It has been some time since Cassandra leaves, and Mars is back to what he calls his ordinary life. Ordinary, in his case, means Gamarus is still gunning for him, and he is already dealing with the 10th assassin this month alone. Mars even worries that the assassin industry might crash with a worker shortage if they keep coming for him at this rate. Here's the quick breakdown of the royal mess. Gamarus forces the king to marry her daughter and have a son as part of her master plan. That's why she wants Mars out of the picture to clear the way for her own bloodline to inherit the throne. Mars only survives because Cassandra, the Red Demon, becomes his mentor, but she's no soft guardian angel. If Mars slacks off even a little, she is ready to take his life herself. He basically has no choice but to grind harder and keep getting stronger if he wants to stay alive. One night, after a round of monster hunting, Mars stumbles across a group training in the forest. He politely asks to join, but the men recognize him as a noble and instantly warn him to stay away. Clearly, they are not fans of nobility. Still, one of them agrees to spar, making Mars think he has found someone reasonable. But the guy turns out to be another clown, telling Mars not to cry if he ends up dead. Mars blocks the attack with ease, but his counterblow smashes the guy Ogma into the ground. Mars is impressed. Ogma is still breathing since most assassins are sliced clean in half by a hit like that. The rest of the gang, however, freaks out and charges at him all at once. After flattening them, Mars casually declares that they will now be his training partners once every 7 days. Since he's stronger than all 5 combined, he figures they need him just as much, but the gang protests. They argue that he's messing with their lives when they already struggle just to eat. They accuse him of being spoiled, used to fancy noble meals. Demanding proof, they ask what he ate today. Mars casually replies that he ate red bone meat. Ogma loses it because red bone monster meat is famously toxic, instant game over for humans. The gang assumes Mars is trolling them. Mars, irritated at being mistaken for a freak, tells them to look behind. A monster bellows, but the gang only competes in who can scream the loudest. Mars just wonders if this blood bear will taste decent for tomorrow's dinner as he slices it apart. Ogma freezes in disbelief, but Mars proves his point by eating the meat himself. He even tosses them some, telling them to take only a nibble since a full bite could end them. They listen and immediately regret it, puking everything out. Ogma's story unfolds. He is the third son of a noble pushed toward etiquette instead of swordsmanship, but he hates manners, always dreaming of honing his blade. People laugh at him for training for some imaginary war, so he ditches his noble name, gathers his friends, and forms a group. He calls it 100. An organization where only raw strength matters. Power decides the hierarchy, and the title of one goes to the strongest. By now, the group has over 20 members, priding themselves as the strongest force in the nation, stronger than the knights, who they mock as useless showpieces. Then Mars shows up, telling them to devour monster meat. Ogma forces it down with all his willpower as Mars explains they have to start with local monsters since it's their first time. Ogma feels pathetic. They brag about seeking power, but here they are weak, lacking determination, lacking everything. At last, he bows before Mars, acknowledges his strength, and grants him the title Zero, begging for his guidance. From that day, Ogma calls Mars Number Zero, and even suggests a new alias, Zeros, since Mars's real name is too obvious. Mars also hides his identity under old armor found in ancient ruins, and begins training with them at full strength. His skills skyrocket, especially in group combat. Even more surprising, no matter how many times Mars knocks them out, the 100 always get back up, fighting until they collapse. Not even the assassins chasing him show that kind of grind set. It's bizarre but satisfying. Just like that, a year flies by. Training continues as usual, but Mars notices things getting unhinged. The men treat monster meat like divine treasure, devouring it like lunatics. Those who stomach stronger monsters are hailed as legends, while those who can't are branded weaklings. Mars doesn't believe greatness should be judged like that, but the others worship him as god tier for eating dragon meat. Even as a prince, he never had this much respect. It leaves him with messy, mixed feelings. Meanwhile, in the Black Knights of Falun headquarters, Commander Crom is briefed about this strange group. They eat monster meat, fight non-stop, and some of his own knights have joined. While their monster hunts lighten the knight's load, Crom isn't convinced. To him, eating monster meat and drinking blood sounds like cult-level insanity. He decides to investigate personally. Going undercover, Crom drops the gel in his hair and goes incognito in 100. His first mission with them is monster hunting, followed by their meat-eating ritual. To his shock, they welcome anyone. His skill impresses them so much they say he can immediately join the ranking battle. But there's one golden rule: eat monster meat or you're nothing. They hand him some, promising it'll make him stronger. Crom takes one bite, pukes instantly, and panics. He suspects they've figured out his identity and are poisoning him on purpose. Convinced they're a twisted cult, he vows to subdue them once he has enough proof. Fast forward a year, and Crom is hyped. He now praises monster meat as incredible. His body feels amazing. His strength is multiplied, and life in 100 feels addictively real. Every night, they hunt monsters, eat, and duel until one drops. At first he questions his sanity, but chasing pure strength feels too exhilarating to resist. At the top stands Zeros, mastering legendary techniques said to be used by the nation's founding hero. Even more insane, Zero shares those skills with the group. Crom is so impressed he practically develops a crush. For the first time, Crom feels he's found a reason to live. Rumors about 100 spread across the kingdom. Nobles dismiss them as barbarians, while commoners hail them as allies. Mars admits to himself life as zeros is way more fun than living as a constantly targeted prince. Then the king summons him. He calls 100 a cult spreading corruption through monster meat. Gamarus, ever the snake, adds fuel by saying Mars is next in line for the throne but has a pathetic track record. He suggests Mars crush 100 to prove himself. Mars is floored. Gamarus is basically asking him to take himself down. He knows the group has strong public support, so if he destroys them, his own popularity tanks. Gamarus is clearly setting him up. But with the king siding with him, Mars has no choice but to agree. Mars understands the trap, but not how to escape it. Returning to his chambers, he finds a stunning girl waiting. She greets him like she already knows him. Mars is baffled. Who is she, and why is she in his room uninvited? Assassin? Probably not, since her aura feels way too refined. She offers him her power to handle his situation. More shockingly, she reveals she knows his secret identity, Zeros. The girl is totally down to lend her support to both Mars and Zeros, but the guy himself, confused as ever, asks who she even is. She, unfazed and not offended in the least, casually reminds him that she is Frau, his fiancée. Mars suddenly has one of those oh crap moments, realizing that he actually does have a fiancée. He quickly apologizes for not remembering sooner, but his curiosity gets the better of him and he asks what she means by calling him Zeros. Sure, it's true that he is the leader of 100 under the alias Zeros, but he has been hiding his real identity as the prince. Besides, it has been years since he last saw Frau, so in his mind, there's no way she could possibly know what's going on with him now. Frau, however, proudly reveals that she has been watching over Mars all this time through the crest. With that crest, she can literally share his vision and even teleport to his side whenever she feels like it. Mars is floored by this revelation, but the proof is right there sitting on his wrist. He finally remembers that Frau had cast a weird spell on him back when they were kids. At the time, it just looked like a cool mark, so he brushed it off and didn't think too much of it. Now, it hits him that Frau has basically been keeping tabs on him all these years through that mark. He realizes that his fiancée isn't just clingy, she's low-key terrifying. Frau had first met Prince Mars when she was only 8 years old. Her father introduced them as fiancés, but to her, even though he carried the title of prince, he looked completely ordinary aside from the fancy, overpriced clothes he wore. At that time, she wasn't remotely interested in him. She had just learned a new pact mark spell, so she used him as a test subject. The mark worked perfectly, so she was satisfied and moved on. Later, when Mars was 11, Frau heard rumors that he was on the brink of death due to poison. Since she was weirdly fascinated by poison, she decided to use the contract for the first time. That was when she noticed something odd. Mars had started eating monster meat. It was gross and bizarre, but it made things more interesting for her. From then on, Frau used the pact mark frequently. Even though the monster meat looked nasty, she realized that his magical power was growing stronger. Naturally, she thought it would be a good idea to copy him. She ate monster meat herself, and boom, her magical power skyrocketed. From that moment on, she was never bored with Mars again. Now, Mars faces a brand new problem. His private life has basically been live-streamed to Frau this whole time, but he decides to set that nightmare aside for now. When he brings up her earlier statement about lending power, Frau simply brushes him off, saying they can talk about it later. Meanwhile, at 100's base, Zeros notices Crom and Warren acting unusually serious. Honestly, it still feels surreal to him that 2 of the 4 Night Order leaders of the kingdom have thrown in with 100. In Falun, there are 4 Night Orders in total. The White Knights are tasked with protecting the king and the most powerful nobles, while the Blue Knights guard the royal capital. The Red and Black Knights handle expeditions and monster subjugation during times of war. Heavy stuff. In this tense atmosphere, Ogma steps forward to inform Zeros that the country is planning to wipe out 100 completely. It turns out Crom, commander of the Black Knights, and Warren, commander of the Red Knights, have both been assigned to lead the charge. Zeros casually suggests they just bail from the country, but no one listens when Crom and Warren suddenly declare that the Black and Red Knight orders have decided to side with 100 until the bitter end, accepting whatever decision Zeros makes. Zeros is baffled. Crom insists that the kingdom has lost all sense of justice, and they're prepared to rebel under Zeros' leadership. Zeros, completely overwhelmed, can't believe what he's hearing. Instead of fleeing, they're dead serious about betraying their own country and starting a full-blown civil war. Honestly, he wants no part in that mess. A rebellion sounds way too problematic for his taste. If it were up to him, he'd rather skip town, chill in another country, and live his life freely. To dampen the hype, he decides to drop his real identity, hoping it will shut down the rebellion talk once and for all. When Warren, Crom, and everyone else learns that Zeros, the leader of 100, is actually Prince Mars, their shock is beyond words. Mars thinks that revealing he's royalty will make them realize there's no way a prince would start a rebellion against his own nation. But Crom completely misreads the situation, claiming that he perfectly caught Mars's thoughts. He believes Mars doesn't want a rebellion. He wants a legitimate war. Mars is dumbfounded. Crom then goes even further, announcing that this would be a righteous battle for Prince Mars to become the rightful successor. Mars, meanwhile, is losing his mind, thinking that no matter how you slice it, rebellion is still rebellion, whether you're a prince or not. Another 100-member pipes up, claiming Mars has been preparing for this for years, gathering strength through 100. Mars internally groans, wanting to clarify that he never planned any rebellion because, honestly, who in their right mind would start something that dangerous? And, truth be told, it wasn't even his idea to grow the group. 100 members themselves just kept dragging more people in. Now the organization has ballooned to over 1,000 members, even though it's literally called 100. Mars tries to lay down the cold reality. Even with an army, storming the royal castle is basically suicide. It's not just the white and blue knights they'd have to face, but the entire magic division as well. Just as he tries to hammer the point home, Frau suddenly pops in out of nowhere and declares that the magic division is already aligned with Mars. Mars is utterly shocked, but Crom calmly explains that Frau had already told them everything in advance. He even introduces her to the others as Frau, the Empress of Thunder. She isn't just powerful, she's the core force of the magic division and a critical piece of the nation's defense. With that kind of assurance, the whole of 100 is completely hyped, convinced that victory is in the bag. Everyone's fired up except Mars, of course. He still can't wrap his head around why everyone is set on rebellion, when running away was clearly the safer option. The story is now steamrolling toward a civil war, and he's somehow the center of it. Mars doesn't want Frau to risk herself unnecessarily, so he presses her for the real reason she's helping. Sure, they're engaged, but that was arranged by their parents, so she doesn't need to gamble her life just because of it. Frau explains that up until now, she hasn't acted like a proper fiancé, but she wants to change that. The only reason she gained the insane magical power to earn the title of Empress of Thunder was because she followed Mars's reckless example and ate monster meat. At first, she wasn't into him at all. But now, she's so invested that she can't even imagine breaking their engagement. To her, a man whose life constantly dances on the edge of death is the most fascinating thing ever. She wants to keep watching him forever and genuinely feels lucky to have him as her fiancé. Mars, of course, can tell her definition of concern is straight out of her own unique dictionary. Meanwhile, 100 is getting more and more pumped for the coming war. They've got Crom, commander of the Black Knights, Warren, commander of the Red Knights, Frau, the Empress of Thunder, Ogma, the entirety of 100, and last but not least, their leader Zeros, who is none other than Prince Mars himself. They're determined to purge the kingdom of all its corrupt nobles. Mars can't deny that with this unshakable lineup, their chances of winning look pretty solid. But the path ahead is obvious. Now it's leading straight into rebellion. And to make it worse, Mars never even wanted the throne in the first place. Ogma and Crom step up, declaring that they are ready to lay down their lives for Prince Mars, fully recognizing him as the kingdom's rightful heir. They burn with determination to make this rebellion a success, standing tall in the name of justice. The weight of their words makes the intensity of the situation slowly creep up on Mars, and reality hits. There's no turning back now. He never wanted to start a rebellion. He doesn't even want the throne in the first place. All he ever wanted was to survive. But after living so long without allies, he now has people claiming they'll stand by his side. Their trust is so heavy, so intense, that he can't even bring himself to turn away. Frau notices the worry written across Mars's face, the fear that he's becoming a real threat to the kingdom itself. She just can't look away from him, and with a steady heart she reassures him they'll see this rebellion through no matter what, and she wants to fight right there beside him. The day of the subjugation of 100 finally arrives. Mars has the company of the White Knights, but their commander makes it clear that Mars should leave the heavy combat to the commanders of the Black and Red Knights. His role, they say, is only to take down Zeros, the leader of 100. But Mars knows the ugly truth. The White Knights are composed mostly of noble sons, the spoiled friends of Gamarus. Instead of protecting him, they're far more likely to stab him in the back. In fact, they even push him toward dueling Zeros, secretly hoping he'll fall. Crom and Warren report to him saying they are ready to advance but would like to borrow him for a few words before they move. The White Knight commander immediately objects, declaring that Mars can't be addressed directly, much less about 100. But his jaw practically hits the floor when he sees that the Red and Black Knights have arrived in full force. He tries to act tough, still clinging to pride, saying that their knightly order has fallen from grace by taking mere commoners as true opponents. But when Crom and Warren stand their ground with unshakable resolve, Mars realizes he has no choice but to harden his own. He steps forward, addressing his forces with iron in his voice, and declares that their true enemy lies within the royal capital. The White Knight commander goes pale and tries to protest, but Mars ends him with a single clean slash. The Red and Black Knights hype up hard at the display of flawless swordsmanship, while the White Knights are straight up pissing themselves in fear. Mars confirms aloud what everyone knows but refuses to say that no matter the outcome of this battle, the White Knights were planning to betray and eliminate him in the end. Their shock at being exposed is priceless, but Crom isn't even surprised. Without hesitation, he starts chopping their heads off. The White Knights cry out that they were only following orders, but Crom ignores their excuses, spitting on their cowardice. To him, they're pathetic knights who cower in fear and pass the blame whenever things get hard. With blazing passion, Crom cuts down every last White Knight around Mars, the battlefield turning into a grim testament to his loyalty. When he's done, he turns to Mars and asks him to step forward to bring true justice to this rotten kingdom. Mars feels the warmth in Crom's loyalty, but at the same time there's something almost too intense in Crom's gaze. Warren interrupts, warning Mars that they're probably being watched every step of the way, which means from here on out it's just a race against time. The army pushes toward the royal capital, but a White Knight blocking the way orders the gates sealed. Before the command can even take effect, Bled, the commander of the Blue Knights, takes the guy out in an instant. He orders the gates opened and boldly declares that the Blue Knights pledge themselves to Prince Mars. Gratitude swells in Mars's chest as he steps into the capital. Inside the city, Mars notices the 100 clashing with the White Knights. The nobles mock them, sneering that commoners don't know true swordsmanship, but Adma and the others tear through the showpieces with ease, reminding them that this isn't some stage for showing off but a battlefield where survival is everything. True strength is crushing the enemy into the dirt, and high ideals won't save them from raw power. Adma keeps smashing foes left and right, and Mars overhears someone mutter that 100 are nothing but thugs. He can't even deny it because honestly, it's kind of true. Another voice pipes up, warning that the Mage Corps are still in play and things will get real messy once the mages step in. At the Mage's Tower, Frau is cornered by her frantic father, who tells her Mars has ignited a rebellion. But she stays perfectly calm and tells him to step down, right here and right now, and pass the family title to her. Her father stammers that he's not old enough to retire, and that a woman can't possibly become the head of the family. Frau finds the excuse pathetic. She rebels, unleashing her attack. In an instant, all the mages around her drop, leaving only her father standing. She explains coldly that the first strike is meant to shock, the second is lightning, the third is explosion, and the final one is dissolution. She demonstrates each one on the helpless mages, then repeats her demand: surrender the title just this once and grant his daughter her wish. Her father can only scream in horror. Meanwhile, the White Knights panic over the absence of the mages. Mars, however, guesses right away that Frau is the reason behind their delay. His comrades urge him to leave the fighting to them and push inside the castle. And once he does, Mars finally comes face to face with Gamarus. The slimy schemer sneers that Mars's path to the throne ends here, as 5 mysterious figures appear to block his way. The group of 5 shows up, loud and bold, declaring that they are here to take Mars's life. Mars glances at his father on the throne and feels a sharp pang of pain, because deep down he knows the man never truly investigates his mother's death. The king probably doesn't even care who wins this clash, as long as he himself makes it out alive. The mage steps forward and casts a crushing gravity spell, weighing Mars down. Gamarus smirks smugly, thinking Mars won't be able to move an inch now. The slimy snake even brags that while Mars might be shocked by this sudden rebellion, he has been ready for it all along. He even went out of his way to hire a rank adventurers. But Mars, unfazed, simply rips off the gravity bracelets Cassandra once gave him and starts moving like it's no big deal. The adventurers panic when they realize their spell actually works but doesn't restrain him. Mars coolly tells them that gravity is fine, he's just gotten used to it. The remark leaves them rattled, because no one has ever heard of such a thing. Still, they attack, tossing a pouch of lizard poison. Mars remembers instantly that the meat of those creatures tastes disgusting, and their poison isn't even that strong. One guy freaks out, shocked that Mars claims to have eaten the beast made almost entirely of poison. Another thinks he's bluffing and rushes forward, but Mars slices the man clean in half with a single strike. Everyone ace freezes in terror. Their leader shouts at the healer to fix him, but the healer shakes her head, saying they'd need a necromancer for that. Mars shrugs it off and apologizes, saying it's been a while since he fights without the gravity bracelets, so his control is a bit sloppy. The assassin swears and orders everyone to attack at once. Mars moves faster, unleashing Sonic Blade, cutting the assassin apart like shredded cheese. Again, the healer is begged to help, but she refuses, saying only a saint could patch them back together. Mars starts finding them entertaining. The mage, desperate, casts her strongest spell, Crimson Flames, intending to incinerate him. Mars admits to himself he can't dodge it, so he raises a magic barrier. The mage drops to her knees, crying that it was her best spell. The rest of the crew is stunned, because only top-tier monsters can create barriers like that. Mars enjoys their shock. He explains that he mastered the skill after countless battles with demon apes, eating their meat over and over until his body adapted. He steps forward and tells them to stand aside, making it clear he doesn't plan to take their lives. But the leader feels insulted, his ego as an A rank flaring. He charges Mars head-on with his sword, overflowing with pride. Mars counters his strikes, and though he admits silently that the guy's swordsmanship is sharp, he ends it with a brutal kick, sending the man flying into the wall. The guy lies stunned, unable to believe Mars had the audacity to kick during a sword fight. Mars just grins, saying his master left him with some bad habits. Now only Gamarus is left, and the man is on the verge of pissing himself. He can't believe things spiraled this badly. In his head, he insists he's poured everything into this kingdom, that all he does is for the people. He flashes back to 15 years ago, when the kingdom is chaos, and he blames the former queen as the culprit. Back then, he convinces the king to stage a coup, claiming it's the only way to save their nation. Since then, Gamarus works tirelessly with the nobles, slowly dragging the country back into shape, balancing the noble factions, accepting both the dirty and the clean politics. But Mars has always been a dangerous variable in his plans. He fears that sooner or later, some noble will use the prince as a pawn, and he vows to prevent that. Innocent or not, Mars has to be erased. Yet Mars somehow survives the poisons, the traps, and the endless assassins. The bitter memory cuts short when Ogma and Crom burst into the throne room, reporting that all the nobles are crushed. Only Gamarus remains. Mars is stunned. If all the nobles are gone, who rules this kingdom now? At that moment, Gamarus realizes in horror that Mars is actually Zeros, the leader of the rebel faction this entire time. Mars is caught in a bind. The 100 can't be trusted to rule, and without nobles, the kingdom risks falling into chaos. He thinks about giving the throne back to his father, but the man bluntly insists the throne belongs to Mars now. Mars accepts, though he wishes his father would at least pretend to hesitate. He scans the room, searching for someone competent to handle governance. Ironically, the only one with experience and sanity is Gamarus. So Mars leaves the kingdom's administration to him. Yep, back to square one. The kingdom bounces back to order faster than expected, and Mars's wedding is arranged immediately. The bride, of course, is Frau, who earns respect through her bravery during the Civil War, but she's eager to try a summoning ritual that requires a human sacrifice, and Mars starts doubting if having her as queen is really the brightest idea. Ogma and the others constantly roast Mars for trusting Gamarus again, but Mars doesn't know who else could handle it. The 100 are obsessed with the motto that only the strong deserve power, so they are out of the question. To everyone's surprise, Gamarus turns a new leaf, working day and night to prove his loyalty to the people. Eventually, Mars is officially proclaimed king by his father, and the entire kingdom celebrates their new ruler. The irony isn't lost. Mars only ever wanted to survive, but somehow, eating monster meat drags him all the way to the throne. The real question now is, what kind of life is waiting for him next? The 100 members show up carrying a completely severed arm and toss it at the healer, asking her to fix it like it's nothing. She gets to work, and when the job is done, they hype her up, saying she's an A-rank cleric on another level, like straight-up legendary tier. Now let's rewind and break down this wild scene. Ranked 1st, Ogma versus ranked 5th, Bruno. Both of them are core members of the 100, battling it out in the arena ranking matches. Ogma clearly flexes the upper hand and slices off Bruno's right arm mid-battle, leaving the crowd and his opponent completely shaken. Mars, watching from the stands, can't believe it has spiraled into such a brutal spectacle. Ever since Mars took the throne, Gamarus has been moving like a man possessed, working with almost unsettling zeal. By seizing the assets of the nobles, the kingdom's finances made a massive turnaround. But here's the kicker, Mars still hasn't rewarded the 100 for backing him during the rebellion. To fix that, he decides to build them a proper arena. The old training grounds were shabby and uninspiring, and Mars figures a brand new arena would be the perfect reward for a bunch of battle maniacs. Gamarus, though, always takes things up a notch. He catches onto Mars's idea and spins it into something bigger, a public spectacle where the ranking matches become a national event. With admission fees pouring in from spectators, the kingdom could stack up cash. Mars tries to say he didn't mean it that way, but Gamarus doesn't let go. He insists that Mars is hinting at a gambling-based arena where citizens bet on the 100's ranking battles. To Gamarus, it sounds like pure genius. After all, Falun is a broke country with no thriving industry. He even convinces himself that Mars had been planning this masterstroke all along. Mars stays quiet, deciding to just let it ride. If it benefits the kingdom, he doesn't really care. Within half a year, the arena is complete, and sure enough, thanks to gambling, the kingdom's revenue more than doubles. Soon, one of the 100 burst into the clinic begging for help, dragging a dying friend along. A rank cleric, Luida, who now serves exclusively as their healer, takes one look and points out that the guy's got a whole sword sticking through his chest. To her, healing him is impossible, but his buddy drops to his knees, bawling, and begs her to bring him back, saying he won't know how to live if his friend dies. Odma himself steps in, demanding she resurrect the man, saying if she can't even do that, then who knows who's next to fall. The sheer desperation makes them all cry so hard that Luida herself breaks down in tears. By some insane miracle, her desperate prayers pull the guy back to life. Exhausted and ticked off, she warns them not to mess with her again, swearing that if they push her next time, she'll just raise zombies and have the culprit locked up. Mars watches the chaotic scene with a mix of amusement and curiosity, right up until someone arrives to summon him for a special match. As king, Mars can't refuse. He heads to the arena knowing the drill. Contestants like Ogma rake in prize money, live the dream of fighting before roaring crowds, and soak up fame, wealth, and prestige. These days, the 100 rankers are treated like stars, envied by all. And Mars, the king himself, is forced to fight against them in up to 10 matches every single day. They even heckle him to ditch his armlets and go all out. Tired of being hounded, Mars once tried to outsmart them, saying he'd grant a special match only to those who won a ranking match. He thought this slick move would clear the field fast, but oh no, that backfired hard. They now fight non-stop, winning ranking matches left and right, just to earn the right to face him again. No matter how many times he flattens them, they rise like zombies, unrelenting. Mars has no choice but to swat them down in one strike, every single time. He wonders where it all went wrong, why he's trapped in this cycle, fighting day after day when everyone else gets at least 5 days of rest. Gamarus, ever the opportunist, encourages him to keep the special matches rolling since the crowds triple whenever the king fights. Mars, however, feels less like a monarch and more like a gladiator slave. And thanks to Luida, who revived the 100 endlessly, his nightmare doesn't end. Sure, he hired her as a healer, but he never expected it to backfire this badly. He considers complaining to Gamarus, but the man is so overworked and haggard, thin, exhausted, worn down that Mars swallows his frustration. By the day's end, Mars claims another victory, wrapping up the special matches at last. But peace doesn't last, because after the arena, the true nightmare kicks in dinner. Luida stares at her plate, still unable to accept why she has to eat poisoned food while spamming detoxification spells on herself just to survive the meal. Reports arrive that the poisoned rabbits are on the brink of extinction. Mars can't believe it, swearing that monsters should respawn endlessly. Maybe they've been pushed out of the territory rather than completely wiped out. The situation gets worse. Dragons have stopped flying over the kingdom altogether because the 100, hungry for rare meat, hunt them like sport. Even Frau's mage corps has joined the dragon hunting craze. Mars thinks it's absolutely bonkers that his kingdom has turned into such a deadly zone that even dragons avoid it. Still, he figures fewer monsters means less damage to crops and villagers, which is at least a silver lining. Gamarus, however, drops another reality check. For those not used to it, monster meat stronger than rabbit meat is dangerously poisonous. The new 100 recruits can't even adapt to it. Mars grumbles that they should quit eating such toxic junk altogether. He'd prefer real food, something actually tasty. Half joking, he says that if they love monster meat so much, they should just raise the beast themselves. To his shock, Gamarus latches onto the idea instantly. Mars can't believe he's taking it seriously. Breeding monsters for food? Other nations would brand them insane. He tries to clarify, saying monsters could be used for eating or maybe entertainment at best. Gamarus, of course, twists it again, insisting Mars is hinting at using monster breeding as the first step in military strategy. Mars is floored, but Gamarus looks at him like he's some visionary mastermind. He goes on, pointing out that in the northern kingdoms they raise dragons and train dragon riders, so why shouldn't they do the same? He dreams of boosting their military, spectacle, and meat supply all at once. Mars, meanwhile, feels like he's being railroaded into becoming some demon lord who breeds monsters for war. And before he can shut down this madness, Frau steps in, looking at him with eyes sharper than Bloody Mary. Bound by their contract seal, she overheard everything and even muted his voice, making it clear she's on board with monster breeding too. Mars feels the last of his resistance crumble. If Frau set on it, there's no stopping her. Holding her back would only unleash chaos, so he caves in. Little does he know, though, that their relentless monster hunting spree will later trigger a massive calamity, and somewhere beyond his kingdom's borders, someone approaches with fury, determined to make the so-called Mad King Mars face the consequences. In the kingdom of Falun, a monster mass production plan has already kicked off. Mars is cool with it since Frau looks genuinely happy, but deep down he wonders if they really need to turn monsters into raw military power. After all, who would even bother invading their small and remote kingdom? Honestly, Mars just wants to duck out of these headaches altogether. And of course, that's when more chaos lands right in his lap, in the form of Crom, who struts in proudly showing off his so-called gravity bracelets that match with Mars. Mars is floored because, in reality, the so-called matching bracelets are just straight-up prisoner shackles. The things were literally made to keep criminals from escaping. Commit a crime in another country and boom, you get one for free. And yet, somehow, these clowns are his kingdom's elite soldiers. Then again, he is not exactly the best person to be talking smack. Frau suddenly drops another curveball, saying she has a gift for Mars and plops the enchanted bracelet right into his lap. She brags that boosting it with 5 times more gravity was insanely tough. Mars realizes this is high-level magic, but he really doesn't vibe with it. He thinks 3 times gravity is already more than enough because, let's be honest, 5 times gravity would straight up wreck his daily life. But Frau is clearly not feeling his attachment to the bracelet Cassandra gave him. With that, Mars is completely speechless. Through their contract sigil, Frau is always watching over him, always guarding him in her own way. Even the fact that Cassandra exists as his master is something only Frau knows. The poison ring and the gravity bracelet Mars wears right now both came from Cassandra, but honestly their effects are flat out awful. Mars thinks jealousy looks kinda cute on Frau, but he wishes she wouldn't try to one-up Cassandra like this. So, he suggests that a gift with some magical protection would be better since it would actually keep him safe. Frau, however, declares that strengthening her husband is her wifely duty. She asks in such an adorably earnest way that Mars basically melts on the spot. He has no clue what goes on in her head sometimes, but he knows she works crazy hard for him. When everyone told her to break off their engagement, she flat out refused. She even backed him up in the rebellion without hesitation. So even if Frau sometimes lacks a touch of human emotion, she's still precious to him as his wife. Mars thanks her for the gift and promises to wear it every day. But later, the throne beneath him cracks and shatters under the insane weight of her enchanted love. Her affection, quite literally, is physically heavy. Not long after, a messenger from the kingdom of Cadenia shows up before Mars. Cadenia is a neighboring country, also bordering the demon beast forest. But unlike Falun, it's got a longer history and is ranked higher on the world stage. Both nations have been dealing with the demon beast forest, so keeping decent relations wouldn't be a bad move. Mars receives a letter from the king of Cadenia and finally feels like he's about to do something properly king-like. Except, the letter turns out to be nothing but a complaint. The king of Cadenia writes that Falun has gone completely overboard with monster hunting, so much so that the ecosystem is wrecked. Now, monsters are flooding into Cadenia's land, causing havoc everywhere. He demands that Falun take responsibility by hunting monsters in their territory and paying 3,000 gold coins in compensation. In short, this is seriously bad news. If they've been wiping out monsters so aggressively that even dragons are avoiding their land, then of course the neighboring countries are going to feel the fallout. Mars realizes that his own people are at fault, but turns to Gamarus for advice. The old man dismisses it, saying Cadenia is just pinning their monster troubles on Falun. He argues that every nation should deal with its own monster subjugation and questions if Cadenia even has any national pride left. The Cadenia envoy explains that they've handled things themselves for years, but recently Falun's overhunting has driven monsters across the border, making it impossible for them to keep up. Mars thinks his kingdom's idiots have absolutely caused this mess, but Warren jumps in, saying Falun's national policy is about subjugating monsters and developing the demon beast forest, so they've done nothing wrong. Ogma, ever the hothead, outright roars that Cadenia should just clean up its own monsters, and if the monsters are multiplying, then fine, Falun's people should just eat them. Mars knows he needs to remind these meathead subordinates that not everyone thinks the same way they do, and he honestly feels bad for Cadenia. Meanwhile, the envoy is stressing out, realizing this demand might sound completely unreasonable from a diplomatic angle. But the king of Cadenia is furious, and as his representative, the envoy has no choice but to push the demand hard. Honestly, he just wants to get this over with and go home because King Mars is way too terrifying. Even when Mars smiles sweetly at him, it sends shivers down his spine. On the outside, Mars might look like a harmless noble, but the envoy has heard plenty of rumors. They say he was a delinquent prince on the verge of being disinherited, and when he realized he was about to lose the throne, he adopted the name Zeros, gathered a band of outlaws, and launched a rebellion. Supposedly, he slaughtered nobles who opposed him, and even forced his own subordinates to eat poisonous monster flesh to prove loyalty. After becoming king, he even built an arena for gambling, revenue, and sheer entertainment, forcing his men to fight. In the envoy's eyes, Mars is nothing short of a mad king, the last person who would ever accept Cadenia's demands. Even Gamarus thinks the matter is already wrapped up, but Mars suddenly shocks everyone by announcing that they will comply with Cadenia's request. Both sides are absolutely stunned. Mars reasons that plenty of people in Falun are itching to hunt monsters anyway, and since they're already making a fortune from the arena, this isn't a big problem. Plus, keeping peace with neighboring countries is smart. Crom protests, arguing that if they accept such demands, their kingdom will look weak. Mars gets the point, negotiations shouldn't be too soft, but he knows their side is guilty here. He doesn't tell anyone, but the real reason he wants to go along with it is because he plans to take Frau on a trip abroad. Officially, he announces that the expedition will be prepared within a month, and that during this time, Black Knight Captain Crom will assist Cadenia with monster subjugation. The envoy practically cries with relief, overjoyed at how smooth things turned out. Later, Mars's subordinates demand to know the real reason behind his decision. Since he can't just say he wants a vacation, Mars improvises, claiming there's a risk of a monster stampede. Everyone is floored but doesn't challenge him. A stampede means an overwhelming number of monsters suddenly swarming an area. No one knows exactly why it happens, but overhunting often triggers it. Right now, monster activity in Cadenia is rising fast, and if something sparks them, a stampede could break out, devastating the nation. With that explanation, everyone buys into his reasoning, and Mars is happy that his excuse landed so well. Truthfully though, he wasn't lying. If a stampede does hit Cadenia, Falun will be in danger too. This whole expedition doubles as national defense. Crom, completely fired up, now sees the depth of his king's wisdom and vows to succeed without fail. Mars notices how hyped Crom is, but he just shrugs it off as motivation. A month later, Mars finally sets out with Frau for the trip, assuming that by now the monster subjugation is done and dusted, and that the king of Cadenia will welcome them with honor. What he doesn't get is why the operation has turned into a full-scale campaign instead of just a diplomatic envoy of officials and scholars. Ogma announces that they've reached the capital, Moss, and when Mars looks outside, he nearly loses it. The place is swarming with monsters, looking like straight-up hell on Earth. He's shocked out of his mind, wondering where the Black Knights who were supposed to wipe out the monsters even are. The truth is, half a month earlier, Crom had arrived in Cadenia, completely spellbound by what he thought was Mars's master plan. At first, he couldn't grasp why his king agreed to Cadenia's demands, but now he believed it all made sense. According to Crom's grand theory, Mars never actually cared about preventing a stampede. Instead, he purposely wanted to cause one. He believed Mars was playing five-dimensional chess, pushing Cadenia to make such a foolish demand so he could turn it against them. In his eyes, Mars's real strategy was to create a stampede and then sweep in to take control of the country. To make that happen, Crom poured a mysterious liquid all over Cadenia. Back in Falun, research on mass-producing monsters had led to this concoction. Once spread out, it drew monsters like moths to a flame. Cadenia would be devastated, but according to Crom's twisted view, Mars had already planned everything. At the peak of the chaos, King Mars and Frau would show up, save the day, and earn the nation's trust, establishing Falun's foothold. Crom praised his king maniacally, convinced it was all part of the grand design. Back in the present, Mars is horrified when Ogma proudly says that the Black Knights executed the plan flawlessly, but Mars and Frau don't even have time to stress over it. They need to jump in and help wipe out the endless tide of monsters right now. Mars questions why monsters are attacking the royal capital Moss when Crom and his men were supposed to have already dealt with them. He can only wipe out every last monster right now. After some time, he worries that there are still tons of them left and he cannot afford to be late meeting the king of Cadenia. That is when his powerful wife steps forward and, with her darkness flames, wipes everything out like it is nothing. Low-key savage energy. As Mars steps inside the walls, he again wonders what his Black Knights have been doing all this time. George, the captain of the knights who guard Moss, rushes towards Mars to thank him for his assistance. Mars says he would like to arrange an audience with the king of Cadenia, though he does not know how he is supposed to explain this disaster. George informs him that the king of Cadenia is not present. The king fled Moss with royal guards when he received reports of the incoming monster horde. Mars feels relieved that he does not need to apologize to anyone now and even thinks, a bit naively, that the king will let it slide when he comes back if Mars clears out the monsters now. When Mars asks about the wider situation, George tells him that the monster attacks have spread to other cities as well. Mars thinks this is bad news because if the damage spreads, the compensation money will not be enough. He decides to take care of the monsters immediately. George protests, saying they have pride and that it is shameful to beg so much help from another country. Mars worries that Gamarus will chew him out if the reparations go up any further, so he shouts at George and asks if he is willing to sacrifice his people for the sake of pride. George has no choice but to agree. Meanwhile, Ogma and his men report back to Mars that they have finished sweeping the monsters outside the castle, and that most of the beasts that got inside have been dealt with as well. George is shocked that they defeated so many monsters in such a short time, and even Mars thinks his men could drive monsters to extinction without blinking. Nevertheless, Mars announces that they are heading out to deal with the monsters invading Cadenia. Just before Mars and the others arrived in Moss, things played out like this. The fleeing king with his royal guard could not comprehend how monsters were surrounding the whole nation. His plan was to lodge a complaint with Falun and have them exterminate the monsters threatening Cadenia. However, the Black Knights had done nothing when they should have gone to subjugate beasts in the demon forest. It clicks to the king then that Mars could be behind this from the very start. Suddenly there is a loud thundering noise and the carriage comes to a stop. The king steps down to see what happened and finds all his knights dead. He pales at the display, but Crom appears before him and introduces himself as the commander of the Black Knights. The king becomes angry at Crom for breaking their promise of defeating the monsters, but Crom informs him that they have already taken quite a number of monsters. The king asks why his country is still under attack. Crom smirks and explains that one trait of monsters is that the scent of their slain kin sometimes lures stronger predators, so if the extermination is half-assed, it simply invites more of them in. The king protests that he has never heard such reasoning before, so Crom tells him another factor, the potion developed by Falun that can attract monsters. When mixed with monster blood, its effects increase exponentially. The king pieces things together in his tiny brain and concludes that the Black Knights did all this on purpose. Crom admits that their actions led to a stampede, but insists that if this stupid king had not invited foreign knights into his country, none of this would have happened. Cornered, the king says they could have just refused the demand instead of going to such lengths. Crom replies that every foolish move the king made was part of King Mars's plan. Now that he has revealed the truth, Crom thinks he has fulfilled his obligation to his king. He splashes a liquid on the king's face and reveals that this potion is special since it works even without monster blood. Seeing that he has no option to run, the king tries to bribe Crom. Crom, however, ends the king with his sword and says they do not betray their country for money or land. As soon as the king falls, monsters surround him and feast on his large body. Crom watches the scene with a cool mind and mutters that the poor king of Cadenia got mauled by monsters while falling for his life. It is brutal and somehow mercilessly efficient. 3 days later, the people of Cadenia declare Mars their savior. Falun's forces crush the monsters and bring peace to the nation without much trouble. The troubling part is that the king of Cadenia is dead. Sure, there is no one left to complain anymore, but that also means Mars cannot go back to Falun yet. Once he arrives in Moss, he sends his escort knights to hunt monsters and personally travels to heavily damaged cities to help with the cleanup. While he is at it, he tosses around some gold coins, thinking that it might establish a precedent so they will not argue over reparations later. Plus, everyone seems happy, so it does not feel bad to use funds this way. After that, Mars reunites with the Black Knights, and Crom informs him with a straight face that the king of Cadenia perished in a monster attack, and they only found his body along the highway, torn apart by beasts. The nobility of Cadenia is furious that their useless king fled by himself and even died, so they decide to pledge alliance to the kingdom of Falun. Mars thinks it is a pain, but the people hail him as their savior. Mars is in the predicament when George finds him and informs him that the princes of Cadenia wish to meet him. It turns out Princess Rubis of Cadenia stayed in the castle throughout the chaos and now wishes to meet Mars after hearing his heroic stories. Mars does not dislike being praised by royalty, so he decides to meet her. George tells him that she wishes to keep the meeting strictly confidential and asks for a private dinner with him alone. Mars does not mind, thinking that even if it is a secret, Frau will hear everything through the contract mark anyway. Princess Rubis wonders what will happen to Cadenia now. The royal family has lost all credibility. The king died a disgraceful death, and now people worship Mars, a king from another nation. She has heard that Mars showered zones with gold and won everyone's hearts. As for where he got all that gold, apparently it all came from the reparations her father demanded from Falun. She thinks all this is a little too perfect mark anyway. She knows that no one would believe her even if she shouted about it and had evidence, since the people already side with him. Mars is steadily winning over the hearts of the people, but she knows the truth. They call him the Mad King behind his back, so he is dangerous. She wonders what kind of tragedy might follow if he truly takes over Cadenia, and as the only one who sees it right now, she decides to act for the sake. Falun agreeing so easily to the reparations never made sense to her, so she concludes that it was a performance orchestrated by King Mars. He used Cadenia's demands against them and then triggered the stampede with his own hands to invade Cadenia. Princess Ruby shares the idea of assassination with George, explaining that the monster stampede was likely a deliberate scheme by King Mars to annex Cadenia into Falun territory. Now that Mars already has the people's hearts in his grip and most of southern Cadenia has fallen under Falun's control, Ruby insists that saving their country depends on defeating Mars. George, however, feels overwhelmed because no one in their land can actually take down the king. When Mars and his 100 knights entered Moss, they wiped out monsters that even Cadenia's army couldn't handle. Ruby, though, coldly suggests poisoning him, which instantly makes George's face go pale. She further explains that Mars's wife is a powerful magician who would detect poison right away if she's around. So, their plan is to poison him when he's alone at a private meal. Ruby asks George to help her, determined that even if things go south, the blame falls squarely on her and not the country. At the private dinner, Mars is impressed by the lavish royal spread laid out before him. Ruby, on the other hand, can't wrap her head around how defenseless Mars looks, strolling in all alone. A twinge of guilt pricks her, but she pushes it aside. This is their one shot. Every dish on the table has been laced with poison, ensuring Ruby won't get exposed even if Mars randomly asks to switch plates. She braces herself, convinced he will soon be writhing in agony, coughing up blood, and dropping dead in the most gruesome way possible. But in reality, she's a bundle of nerves because this is her first assassination attempt. Mars notices her tension and finds it oddly adorable. When he casually asks what she wanted to discuss, Ruby tries steering him toward politics to hold his attention, but Mars quickly loses interest and starts chatting about the local Cadenian food instead. Ruby's heart skips a beat, panicking that he's noticed the poison. To cover it up, she nervously takes bites herself, encouraging him to dig in more. She even questions whether the dishes aren't to his taste, only for Mars to happily gush that he loves every bit of it. Ruby is horrified watching him devour plate after plate of deadly poison. She glances desperately at George, who reassures her that yes, the food is absolutely poisoned. Ruby feels like crying her antidote is sketchy at best, and if she keeps eating, she might actually end up dying first. While savoring the food, Mars casually shifts back to politics and asks Ruby her age. When she answers that she's 14, he smiles and mentions his younger brother is also 14, saying that meeting her made him think of him. In Mars's mind, it makes perfect sense to dump Cadenia's leadership on Nicole, since Ruby and Nicole are the same age and could figure it out together. Ruby, however, turns pale as ice, thinking Mars is hinting at a political marriage. In her mind, he's scheming to marry her off to his brother so that annexing Cadenia becomes effortless. She feels horrified that he may have seen straight through her assassination ploy and that she and George have just been dancing in the palm of his hand. Oblivious to her spiraling thoughts, Mars casually adds that Nicole is good with politics and would get along with her just fine. Ruby wants to decline with all the royal etiquette she can muster, but the poison fuzzes up her head. Desperate to end the dinner and get to her antidote, she weakly tells Mars that she will consider the proposal positively. Once she takes her leave, Mars is only worried about the mountain of untouched food going to waste. The meeting ends without bloodshed, and Mars immediately contacts Gamarus back home via magic. He explains that he wants Nicole to be put in charge of Cadenia. Gamarus, being the king of misunderstandings, thinks Mars is saying Nicole should marry Princess Ruby and become king of Cadenia. The old man can't help but burst into tears. Everyone had thought Mars would eventually eliminate his half-brother Nicole to secure the throne, but instead Mars not only spared his life, he prepared him for a role as grand as this. Gamarus is overjoyed by such foresight, praising his grandson's fate. Not long after, Nicole and his mother arrive to thank Mars for bestowing what they think is such a wonderful marriage match. Nicole solemnly promises he won't let Mars down. Mars, clueless as ever, doesn't understand why Nicole brought his mother and why they're talking about a fine match. Still, he shrugs it off, thinking at least Nicole looks motivated. Nicole immediately asks about Ruby, so Mars tells him she should be in the castle but is reportedly unwell. Crom then steps forward, insisting on accompanying Nicole, and Mars grants permission, assuming they're just talking about a casual castle tour. Crom, however, looks way too fired up for it to be just a sightseeing trip. At Cadenia Castle, Crom easily defeats all the knights who try to block the path of their supposed future king. Even George steps in to stop them, but Crom boldly declares that Nicole came all this way to meet his bride-to-be. George nearly faints at the statement, but Nicole steps forward calmly to explain that the marriage has already been arranged between Gamarus and Ruby's grandfather, Duke Gordon. Both families are thrilled and have even thanked Mars for this chance. George refuses to believe it, but Nicole insists that Ruby becoming Queen of Cadenia isn't a bad outcome, especially since it covers up her failed attempt on Mars's life. George stutters in shock, but Nicole reminds him that no matter where Mars goes, people always try to assassinate him, forgetting that a true king can't be toppled by mere mortals. Crom backs Nicole with the same raw energy, bluntly asking George if he'll keep resisting because honestly he doesn't care either way. The old man admits he's powerless now, and even Princess Ruby steps in, agreeing that resistance is pointless. But she requests to speak with Nicole alone in her room and he happily agrees. Once inside, Ruby demands to know what they really want from her. Nicole explains that they simply want to rebuild Cadenia into something better, together. Ruby counters that Cadenia was already a good country before Falun barged in. Nicole calmly reminds her that, if that were true, the people wouldn't have turned to Mars so quickly, and if the nation had been well run, no foreign power would have had an excuse to interfere. When Ruby admits that a country exists for its people, Nicole urges her to join them, because no king cares for his people the way Mars does. Ruby finally snaps, throwing every rumor she's ever heard about Mars in his face, siding with bandits, slaughtering nobles, eating poisonous monster flesh, and even building an arena just for his own amusement. She demands to know if Mars is even a decent human being, let alone a good king. Nicole laughs, admitting he can't deny any of that, but points out that Mars has never harmed civilians. He removed nobles who neglected their people, and he hunted monsters threatening towns and villages. That's why he has overwhelming support in Falun, and now even in Cadenia. With nobles gone in Falun, there's no one skimming off taxes anymore. National income shot up, burdens on the people dropped, and honestly, nobody in Falun has a bad word to say about Mars. Ruby is shaken, her little bubble of beliefs pops instantly. Nicole invites her to visit Falun someday to see the truth with her own eyes. He also adds, with a cheeky smile, that he's happy his bride-to-be is both smart and adorable. Ruby, flustered and smitten by that sweet smile, can't resist. The two end up married in a grand ceremony, a wedding that doubles as the official incorporation of Cadenia into Falun. Mars, meanwhile, is glad the countries are getting along, but still can't quite figure out why those two ended up married. Turns out, our protagonist is a totally clueless little Cupid.